Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are talking about Halloween. It is going to be here before we, of course, know it. So I know many of the kids may have already picked out a costume, or maybe you're still trying to decide, but that's okay. Either way, if you've picked one out or not, we have some great tips for you that you need to keep in mind, of course, whenever you are going to be putting on that costume that night.
That's it. One of the big things is remember to dress for the weather. I know we've already discussed that, but again, that really holds true for the costume. Don't obstruct your vision. I will tell you that masks probably aren't your best bet. It's very difficult to see. You have a hard time with your peripheral vision. You can't see if that car's coming. Even looking down is very difficult because you have to intentionally look down, and most of the time kids are so excited they forget to look down. They forget about the curbs and the steps and all the things we've been talking about. So the mask really isn't one of the better ways to cover the face. I would recommend, instead of using a mask, is use makeup. Make it fun, let them be more creative with their own faces, and that makes a lot more safe Halloween costume.
Breathing, too, can often be difficult in those masks. Sometimes you see the mask go on the head because they're having a hard time, of course, running around and breathing in that mask. Right. So definitely good tips. Makeup, and there's all kinds of makeup out there that's safe to use. And
oh, yes, and like most kids, they'll go get into mom's or big sister's makeup, and they can have fun. You don't have to go buy the special stuff, but if you do, make sure that you buy the things that are non-toxic. Don't just melt crayons or anything like that that's not, that is non-toxic. Make sure that you use something that's safe, and regular makeup will work just fine. You don't have to have the fancy stuff.
That's good advice. Another thing, of course, is when it comes to your costumes, what about the length and the flowy costumes?
Oh, yes, the length is very important because if you've got one that's too long, tripping will come into play. Also, make sure that it's not too clingy or too flowy on the arms, because as they're moving around, they can catch those luminaries without even realizing it, or even get caught in bushes or trees and fall down.
Absolutely. And something else, of course, is whenever it comes to having your pumpkin or whatever, you need to have a flashlight as well, correct?
Have flashlights, and that's really the only thing I would recommend that you use as a prop. Carry that flashlight, because if you're trying to carry around a broom if you're a witch, or a sword if you're a pirate or something, really gets too difficult. So really make sure that in your hand is your flashlight, and keep it on. And also, I would put an extra set of batteries down in my kiddo's bucket or bag, and also put reflective tape on the bag and anywhere on their costume that seems like it might be a little bit dark.
That's great advice. And we've also seen the ones where you can stick the luminary in the pumpkins, right? Where it'll kind of, not luminaries, I'm sorry, but
don't use a candle.
Yes. I apologize. Yes, the lights, I'm sorry, and they kind of light up, so that way you're not having to carry so much stuff.
So much things, right. And your pumpkin lights up that way. The only problem with that is if you go to set it down or you lose it, then you don't have your flashlight, but that's a great alternative to a flashlight.
Or maybe even the kids have that, and mom and dad somebody else has the flashlight as well. So two different types of safety measures taking place there. And we've talked a lot about the don'ts when it comes to the costumes, but we have a great example of something that would work for Halloween.
Now this is the perfect costume. The eyes are fully visible, there's no mask in the way blocking his airway, there's nothing. It is perfect. The length of it is good. Everything about it, even his shoes, are just right, because we want to make sure that they're in the most comfortable, easy to get around shoe. So this is a perfect one. All right.
That's a great example of a good costume, of course, to wear that night. But something else to keep in mind if you're going to be putting things together at home, or even whenever you're out shopping, check for the flame retardant tag.
Oh, that's right. A lot of kids will put a sheet over their head or something like that, and they'll home make a costume, which is fine and great. But be sure that it's flame retardant, that you don't have any fire hazards, because you sure don't want to have that happen. Also, a good idea is make sure that you teach them the stop, drop, and roll technique, just in case something does happen, because even with the flame retardant costume, it can still catch on fire, and they need to know what to do and not panic and start running. They need to stop, drop, and roll just as if they would in any other emergency situation involving fire on their clothing.
Absolutely. And something else to keep in mind, kind of going back to the props that we talked about and carrying them around, but you've mentioned this, year after year to us, and it's always stuck out in my head, and that is you think they're not dangerous, but
Right.
they can be, right?
Right, because they're supposed to be these soft little toys, but some of them are the harder plastic or they've got edges. Just make sure that if you're going to carry a prop, that you carry it as a prop and not as a weapon.
Absolutely great advice.
Not even against your brothers or sisters.
Yes, I know all the brothers and sisters out there will appreciate that note. So we need to take another quick break, but we're of course going to come back and talk about candy. Yes, the point of all of this trick-or-treating fun. So you don't want to miss that. We'll be right back with some safety tips that you'll want to hear. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. We are talking about Halloween. I know everyone is getting excited. It's the time of year where you can go door to door and get candy. I mean, it just doesn't get better than that, of course. So.
Nothing's better than free chocolate.
No. And speaking of candy, that's something that is important to talk about because when it comes to candy, you need to check the goodies, of course, and make sure mom and dad checks those, or parents out there. It's important you check those whenever you get home or your kiddos get home, of course, from going door to door. But before you do, there is a good tip you have.
Oh yeah, serve a nutritious meal to your kids before you go out trick-or-treating so that they're not as tempted to break into those goodies before you get home and have time to check them. You want to make sure that everything is intact and make sure that we don't eat any fruits or vegetables or anything like that that may be handed out until you have time to check them.
Absolutely. And speaking of checking that candy, we of course have a great example of things that you should be looking for.
Look at all this wonderful kale. This is yummy, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Now let's check and make sure that the candies are okay to eat. See, those look good. And that looks, oh, look at this one. It's got a little tear right here. What do we do with that?
We don't eat it.
We don't eat this one. We throw this one away because we don't know what's happened to this piece of candy, do we? All right, so we'll throw that one away. Oh, look at all this yummy candy. Looks like all the rest of it's really good. You have to look at each piece.
Something else that was important, you of course mentioned the fruits and the vegetables and the homemade goodies that sometimes people hand out to people, but it's something that you really need to be aware of. And what do you do if you're in that situation?
Well, if you're in doubt, throw it out. I mean, if it looks suspicious or you can't remember where you got it from or who gave that to you, just throw it away. They'll have plenty of other goodies to have throughout the day or whatever, so just throw it out. There's no reason to take any chances. Statistically, there really aren't many tampering episodes, but we don't want to be have yours be the first.
Absolutely. That's great advice. So if you don't know them, it's probably better to just not even risk it then.
That's it. Just throw it away, or if it's opened or torn or the package looks like it's a little bit not intact, go ahead and just get rid of that too.
And we actually put one little one to the test, so let's see how he did.
Do we ever eat fruit that's given to us by strangers on Halloween?
No.
No. Any other time, fruit at home is really good though, isn't it? What about home-baked stuff like yummy-looking cupcakes or... No, we don't eat those either. They may look good, but unless Nana or someone we know makes them for us, we can't have those either, can we?
Well, I have to say he did a great job, and definitely something to keep in mind. Maybe put your little ones to test and, ask them what they would do in a certain situation. I think would be important to do that night as well. So speaking of, kind of trick-or-treating, though, we focused a lot, of course, that on this show because that's what people are going to be doing, but not everyone will be into trick-or-treating, so there's also parties available, so there's some tips for that too.
Right. But one of the big tips on this is know where your kids are going to be that night. If they're going to a party, be familiar with where they're going to be, whether it's at a church, whether it is at a friend's home or at an establishment. Make sure that they still abide by your rules. Make sure that you don't serve alcohol to anyone under the age of 21 if you're hosting a party. And make sure that your kids know that the same rules apply about alcohol and drugs as any other night of the year. And make sure that, If your children are young, don't just drop them off at a party. You know, it'd be best to go ahead and stay there with them, make sure they have a chaperone. Same thing with trick-or-treating. Make sure that you don't just drop them off in a neighborhood. Walk with them, or make sure that you have someone that's responsible to care for your child in your absence.
Absolutely. That's all great advice and something to keep in mind, whether you are going door to door or, you know, going to be taking involved at like a church event or any other Halloween event. And kind of speaking of that, you know, another great thing that we're going to have going on, of course, is our Safe Kids Halloween with News Channel 6, and we're going to be out there all night. So that's another great place. Even if you want to go door to door that night, make sure you come by there as well. It's always held at the Howard Johnson, and it's a safe place, and you just kind of go down the line and get your candy. So nothing beats that, of course. We hope to all see you there, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come in today and, you know, giving us the ins and outs of Halloween and your costume and staying safe that night and, you know, planning and preparing. So thank you so much for doing that, and we all definitely wish you a happy Halloween for you and your kiddos, and I hope they get lots and lots of candy, and feel free to share with us if you have any leftovers. Thanks again for joining us, Texoma. We hope you have a great day. We'll see you back here next Sunday morning for another look inside Texoma.